back to Far From Eden, guys, and it's been so long, so I'm so excited to be sharing another episode with you with someone I've actually known for a while, but as usual, we never really have these deep conversations, so it's fun that I get to share our first deep conversation, despite knowing him for years. And we talk about a lot of things around mental health and just the ups and downs of the whole journey. So this episode is called The Immortal Ghost. Just a combination of one of the songs that he sent me that he wanted to chat about, which is Immortal by Joe Budden, and also the character Ghost from Power. If you're not familiar with them, please look them up for a little context. We do try to give context in the episode, but it might just be interesting for you. In any case, please enjoy the content. There is a trigger warning about suicide, and there's a lot of things that Stanley has been doing around mental health and a few projects that he's been putting together. So watch out for those as well. I will attach his handles on the captions of the episodes. So please feel free to look that up and just find safe spaces to chat about these things, particularly if you're a man or if you're a woman who's close to someone that you know might need help. Yeah. Looking forward to your feedback. As usual, feel free to DM on Instagram, on Facebook, so on and so forth. Enjoy. Well, Stanley, thank you so much for coming on to my podcast. You are the very first episode for season 2.
Okay.
And I've been promising this for a while, so no pressure.
No pressure.
No pressure, but yeah, I'll just start with letting you introduce yourself, basically, and telling us where you're at, and then we'll go a bit into the quotes that you sent me beforehand, which I'm very excited about. But yeah, we'll start with you.
So my name is Stanley. I always hate introducing myself because I feel like a lot of the things that I do, like I don't have titles for. Like I do photo, video. I'm a content creator. I'm also a mod. Like I do like many different things. So I haven't found a word that fully describes what I do. So it's always like very difficult to explain what I do, but I think content creator basically kind of encompasses everything. Yeah, it's something it's funny. The thing I've mentioned is kind of something I've stumbled into with someone just so like, hey, like you should think about doing that. And then it just kind of worked out. So I guess that's who I am. My Instagram name is Outlandish Visuals because I don't know who, but I think I need to pay whoever this person was. It's like, you have a very outlandish personality. I'm like, I just like how that sounded, and I'm like, that's it. That fully describes who I am as a person. So it just made sense.
Yeah. I like how you're saying content creation. Just the other day, I was on. Oh, I want to say it was the east side, so Main Street, and I saw a billboard of you, and I actually pointed out that that's Stanley. So whatever you're doing, you're doing right, because I've been seeing a lot of your face all over the city. So shout out to you before we even get into the conversation. Shout out to you.
Even with that too, because even with a lot of those projects, I always do them like months prior to it. Yes. So with this one, I actually did this one in January, I think it was, and it's like for the past I think month and a half is literally been people like, hey, like I'm not trying to be weird, but is this you? And it's literally like, because it's like a nationwide campaign. So I have like people like Toronto, like Alberta, even like locally too. I've had people like who've gone and taken selfies with it. Yeah. So it's like this surreal moment where you forget about it. And then like when you try to forget about someone else, like literally just before I got on the call with you, someone was like, again, like, is this you? I'm like, just like, yeah, LOL, that is me.
It's one of those, I would hate to want to forget about you because you're everywhere.
You know, it's like
it is what it is. Well, no, good for you though. I think you should be enjoying it. Like I struggle with enjoying things like that. When I see myself achieving something and people shout me out, I'm kind of like, like, why are you guys even bringing it up? So I hope you are enjoying it.
I definitely am, and especially like with this one in particular too was I was going through a very weird time in life where it's like a lot of like I almost didn't even do that shoot because I'm in like a transitional period where a lot of things in my life were just happening, and I remember like the day of the shoot, just lying in bed, I'm like, I don't really want to do this, and I was on the phone with my sister. She's like, dude, you better get up and go get this money, bro. Like we're not playing the game. And it's crazy because even like after I did, I'm happy I did it because it's like one of the best shoots I've done. Not because of how I perform, but just being able to like overcome like adversity and just like do stuff even when it's difficult. And it's weird even when I see like the reactions I've been able to create by people seeing that and like
Yeah.
made a post about it a couple of weeks ago, like just being in that moment. And I'm like, I remember going back to him, like, imagine if I'd said no and I didn't get out of bed, I would have reaction. So it's like, even when I share that story, it's crazy the reactions I get because it's like, it reminds people like, even when things are tough, you
Yeah.
still get up and just like do stuff. You never know what opportunities you miss by not,
Yeah.
just being people. Right? So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I've been struggling a bit with that myself. So it's something I can relate to, just like having to wake up and just do it.
Yeah.
And the feelings. I don't know, when you're in your feelings for
Oh,
whatever reason, it can be anything tiny. It's just they govern you so much. And yeah, I mean, this is a nice segue to the things that you sent me. So you sent me a bunch of so I you guys know I ask people to send me stuff before the podcast, and Stanley sent me 4 things. You sent me a quote, you sent me a song. Well, you sent me 2 quotes, you sent me a song, and you sent me a movie character.
yeah.
And yeah, I don't know if you want to introduce any of them first, or you're okay with me just going into
Yeah.
whichever one.
You go. I'm a free flowing guy. Whatever you want to start, let's start there. Because I
I'm
always
just I'm
see how to interpret the stuff I'm thinking about. So like,
yeah.
yeah.
I'm just seeing some relevance from the song Immortal, because I listened to it today. I've never heard it before.
Yeah.
And one of the things you sent me was Immortal by Joe Budden. If you guys have never listened to it, yeah, that's a good point to start. I went on Spotify, I looked up the lyrics, and I got like 4 different things from it, 4 different themes. And the first one, which is really relevant to what you were saying, is nothing can kill me, was like the essence of the song is around, oh, I'm immortal, nothing that happens around me can kill me. So talk to me about that a little bit, because later on I also saw some acknowledgement that even though nothing can kill me, I may be hurting those around me. And I was just listening to the song, I was like, there's a bit of a contrast here, but yeah.
And that's the thing that I like about this song. And it's crazy because when I first heard the song, it was probably I think when I was 16, and I was like in this very like dark place, and we'll talk about that later. And it's crazy because it felt like my whole world around was just like crumbling, and just like it's a song I listened to like when I was working out and like when I was going for runs, and that's how it cleared my head, and it just helped me put myself in this mindset where it's like even though my world around is breaking down, nothing can kill me unless I decide that and give into it. So like, I'm like Bill, and even like there's a part that talks about even like the air I breathe and like the ground around me. I'm immortal in my head, and that's the only thing I need to keep going. And that's been the mindset, especially like the past couple of months, where it's like the things that have happened to me. Because he even talked about it's like it's because for him, the actual song was like him, like people actually trying to kill him. And for me, it's like more symbolic, where I think people were trying to kill the person that I was, and I felt like I was being put in a box. And I think for most of my life, I've also felt very misunderstood, and like people are trying to kill me, and like that version of me, and trying to keep me in that box. And that's mean like once I got into that mindset, like realizing I'm immortal as long as I keep my mind, everything else doesn't matter, and that's what makes me immortal. Where it's like just going into because I even like this parts about it, like I'll read because I even had to like I've listened to so many times of this specific part about it. I wanted to like highlight where it's talking about and it talks there's a part where it goes every problem I had is basically is the cards I've been dealt, and it's like what happened when the gods are dealt, and then God is the one who has dealt them. So it felt like that most of my life where like I've been in these situations where I'm sitting there, I'm like, why am I quote unquote a good person going through these situations? And then you realize like there's lessons within these situations that have been learned. And it's only in hindsight where I've been able to look back and be like, oh, that's why I went through this situation, or this is why this person left my life, or this is why I stumbled at this point because I wasn't ready for this opportunity. So when you look at it from that perspective, like I am immortal as long as I am in that mindset of like nothing can break me down unless I choose to give into stuff. And it talks about stuff that happens in real life, like people will come and go in your life. It's something that we never talk about. We have this assumption that everyone in your life right now is going to be there forever. Like there's some people like your family where will be there, but even with that, like with something we were talking about earlier, like we're all going to die at a certain point. We just don't know when that is. So even with that, it's like, how do you adapt to that when people leave your life? Either them leaving, leaving your life, or physically died. So it's one of those things where it's like, again, it's like it's all about the mindset that you have, like you being immortal. And it's the last part of the song too. It's also talking about like he does this self reflection where it's like his parents were both drug addicts, and then he inherited that gene. And I guess when someone tried to kill him and he got shot, he then ended up being put on Percocet, I think it was, and then he got addicted to it, and then he never really addressed it. And I guess the person that he had in his life at that time was really trying to help him, but it's like he couldn't help himself, and inevitably he lost someone he loved. And he talks about like, I hated that person for a while, but I actually now looking back at it, I embraced that they had the strength to actually leave a toxic relationship, I guess at that point. And it's crazy where it's like it's something similar like has happened to me where it's like certain people left my life recently, and I was like looking at them like with all this anger, I'm like, why did they leave? And I'm like, I look back and I'm like, they had obviously things that they weren't happy about, and they decided to make that step, which takes a lot of courage. Inadvertently hurt me, but I'm like, I give them kudos for making that step. But at the end of the day, I have to move on in my life and just like keep it moving, right? So it's one of those things again, like we never talk about it. It happens all the time.
Yeah. Well, I'm listening to you, and I'm really curious about the killing thing. When we say people are trying to kill a part of you, and I'm like, my next question is, how do you wake up and find that out? Like, what happens? Is it just one of those you're in a situation, you're looking at someone, and you're like, I really don't like who I am around you? Or is it more like slowly you feel yourself losing yourself? And how do you even know that, okay, it's the people around me that are doing it and it's not me?
And so for me, it's crazy. It's been like, I guess, a year of discovery. I realized last year, especially, I had two sets of people that I had around me. And I always was noticing I had way more energy around certain people. And for me, I'm a big on energy. Like energy is a big thing. And it's for me too, it started off with the people around me noticing certain things about me. I'm like, bro, you're not the same. Like even like I'm saying, I have a very outlandish personality. Like they're noticing things about me that and asking me questions like, bro, like you're not the same. Like what is happening? What is my life is kind of like, and it made me question that because I'm a very self-reflective person. And then someone recently gave me a book by young Pablo called what is it? Hold on. Lighter. There we go. Lighter. And literally like the first, I'm not gonna like steal like the first intro of the book because it's you have to read it. And it basically talks about having radical honesty with yourself. And at one point, I think at the end of last year, I looked in the mirror and I wasn't happy with where my life was. And I really started having these conversations with myself, like what is it that's not making me happy? Like what is it about me that has changed? And then it's funny, I made a prayer last year. I was like, God, please remove anything and anyone not helping me progress. And
I always say I don't pray for that until I'm ready.
No, so it's funny because my friends like, dude, you realize God almost has like a Google alert for that.
Yeah, like you don't do it.
Within 2 weeks, it happened. I'm like, oh, right? But even in that dark moment again, like especially reading this book, I had to have uncomfortable conversations with myself, which is what the book suggests, where it's like I realized a lot of the unhappiness was because of me and also the people I had around me. I realized I was a people pleaser. So I always put other people's thoughts and feelings above my own because of my own childhood trauma. And it's funny because it took really like my childhood best friend who I hadn't spoken to in like 2 years to be like, dude, you realize you've been struggling with this for 10 years. This is the reason why this. And a lot of it, I'll be open with, is because of my relationship with my dad. It wasn't necessarily because there was a void that was created. So I always used to fill that void with other things, and like me like thinking, oh, if I don't make people happy, they're gonna leave my life or they're not gonna appreciate me. So up until I had those conversations with myself where I'm like, and these people were inadvertently removed, there was this big shift where it's like it almost felt like my life was light. I was more at peace, and I've been a lot happier. Even though it's crazy because I was on the phone and one of my friends is like, dude, like you're speaking with so much clarity. This was important. It's like because I'd had those uncomfortable conversations with myself, I knew who I was. And I'm a big person on journaling. I literally had to go back to like old journals and just like old things and like remind myself. And again, like having like again the people around me who were reminding me of who I was. And it actually goes into like the quote that one of the quotes that I gave you was sometimes you have to lose yourself to find yourself.
Yeah.
The quote it's one of those quotes I heard and I'm like it's so cheesy and so cliche, but it's like it got to a point where like I couldn't even recognize who I was and why the things I was doing up until like I was so lost. I'm like I had to find myself again, and it's a never ending journey because even like now like I'm surprising myself and like even like realizing like there's so many things that were so important to me before that I lost along the journey because of me letting other people kind of like control and like dictate my life. And that's what I'm saying. Going back to like I felt like I'd been put in a box and I hated being in a box because a lot of the things that I do don't make sense to a lot of people. Like for example, like the way I dress, like I wear pink beanies. I have like very like I know me personally, or if you see me, that's I mean, like my personality. I'm that one friend who says inappropriate things all the time. So that's been always been, but I realized I hadn't been that person in such a long time, and I was like, I had to analyze why is it that's the case. And again, it's like sometimes you have to lose yourself to find yourself, and also just for me, I realized I had problems with being vulnerable. And a lot of the spaces I was in didn't create a safe space for me to actually be vulnerable. And like once I found my tribe and the people that I could be vulnerable with, like, they were able to have uncomfortable conversations with me. And a lot of the conversations, again, like I've been having with myself is just like someone reaffirming that. And also people creating that safe space where it's like they can have these uncomfortable conversations with me, but also creating like, giving me things to actually help me with the things I'm struggling with. Like, for example, like that's why my friend gave me that book, Lighter, was because he's like, you're not being vulnerable. Why is that? So this is a book that I read, I think would help you with that.
Yeah.
It's been a very interesting journey. But it's been a painful one too, because, like when you get comfortable in a space and you've been around certain people for such a long time.
Yeah.
And these are like, you've created bonds with a lot of people too. It's kind of hard for that separation.
Yeah.
But one of the things is it's either we're growing together or we're growing apart. So there's this middle ground for me. For me, like it's funny, I was reading through my old journal and I was like, there's certain things I looked at. For example, like I had an idea of like what I wanted my life to kind of be, not exactly like career, but it's like the people I wanted to have around me, like what kind of like my family would look like, all those things. And I kind of forgot that. I'm like, it's a nice reminder of like I know where I'm going and something not changed. Like elevated. So and also it's nice to realize I was so wrong about so many things. So I'm like, for example, like I looked at the one I was 16 and I was 21. I was like, this guy knew nothing.
Yeah.
I'm like,
sometimes you look at it, you're like, yeah. I mean, this brings up something for me because so I had a very hard time last year. Last year was a very critically hard year for me. And to tell you the truth, I can't put my finger on exactly what it is that was difficult. It was just, I don't know if you ever feel like everything is coming from every single angle. It's like every angle. And on the surface, like the stuff that you're going through or whatever is smaller than what what you've been through before. But for whatever reason, this is the year where everything just hit me the hardest. So I guess that idea of strength or whatever it is just came crashing down, whatever. So I had a lot of time to reflect as well, similar to what you're talking about, where you reflect about the people around you, about the things around you. But something that kept on coming to mind for me, and you brought it up when you say the people pleasing aspect.
Yeah.
I am an extremely nice person. Like I am very generous. It doesn't always show. Like you have to have come into my space to find out that I am. Sorry?
Yeah, 100%. I agree. Like, because sometimes you don't even know it, and then like
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah, yeah. So once you come into my space, you realize I'm really warm and teddy bearish and whatever. But it's the people pleasing thing kept on coming up for me, where it's like putting yourself second. And it's funny because I actually gain from it. So
Yeah.
I have that like altruism that's there where I actually gain from helping you or the next person or seeing another person smile. But it does work to your detriment eventually because everything does have a line, right?
Yeah.
So what kept coming up for me though as well is how much power do we give other people in certain scenarios that maybe actually end up jeopardizing the place that they should be in our lives?
Yeah.
Because I think about a lot of people, I'm like, these people are genuine, they're nice people, they're whatever, but I've given them too much leeway myself.
Yeah.
So they end up turning into villains
Yeah.
simply because of my inability to draw a line or create those boundaries. And so I'm just wondering how much that has been playing for you in terms of wait, like going back to the idea of people killing us again. It's like if I'm sleeping with the door open and
Yeah.
a thief comes in, to what extent do I get to blame them for the
Yeah.
robbery and myself for the lack of precaution and security? Yeah.
And that's the thing where it's like, and it's funny. It's something where even like I don't know if you were taught this as a kid, like like when you're pointing at someone, it's always like well, one finger pointing back at yourself, and like that's the thing I get from the mindset of like me blaming all these people and circumstances for like the reason why I was in these spaces in my life to me taking full responsibility and having that radical honesty with myself, where it's like again, yes, people do wild stuff, 100%.
Yeah.
But it's also like you have to take responsibility. Like you let them do that. You gave them the power to do that, right? And that's one of the quotes I've been listening to on repeat was like, I also have to let go of those people, but I also have to let go of the version of myself that let you run havoc in my life. And listening to it, it's funny, like even the past couple of months, I look at like who I was even on a space of a few months ago and who I am right now, completely different people because I've had that mindset shift. So it's like, of course, yes, we can blame other people and people need to be held accountable. But the number one person you need to have hold accountable is yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like, yes, they did do those, but you let them do it.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't have the boundaries. So it's, of course, people are going to just cross those boundaries, right? And that's the thing where like we've often been told like it's not okay to be selfish, but you have to be selfish in life because you can't burn yourself to light someone else's fire. It doesn't work that way because in the long run, like you said, you end up being burned out, and then like no one is being helped because if you don't help yourself, and that's the thing where it's like even with self love, like I realized that's something that also it's in the book where if you can't love yourself, how do you then expect to love other people?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
You love yourself and you have these uncomfortable conversations, you realize how flawed people are. It's easier for you to give people grace. And that's what I really struggled with, where it's like I was always pointing out the mishaps and the mistakes people were making, but not really, taking the time to actually have that conversation with myself. And the moment I started doing that, it's been easier for me to actually give grace to people, but also setting those boundaries where I'm like, this is a boundary for a reason, and this is to protect you. And you don't understand that, it's cool. Like I'm just gonna go my way, you're gonna go your way, and we'll keep. And there's nothing wrong with that. Oftentimes, especially with people pleasing people like myself, that's often a very hard to people and difficult situation to be in. But it's like in the long run, you have to do that because run over you if you let them.
Yeah, yeah. So, like, what extent of the immortality for now is like walking away from situations and the basically what I'm going for here is like the balance between walking away and amending and like evolving within situations yourself and like thinking about things from that perspective. And I'm just thinking about it from the immortality aspect. Like, what makes us immortal? Is it being able to say bye and like I'm done, or is it like a combination of both? Of like the forgiveness aspect and saying, okay, this is how I used to be in this situation, and I probably let you kill me, and I can change that, or I just, do you get what I mean?
It's kind of a balance, and I think it's a case by case situation.
Mm.
For me, again, like after again reevaluating my life, and like there's a lot of people like you said, I genuinely like Joe Budden says in his songs, he hurt a lot of people. So there's a lot of people I did hurt in my life because of my selfish actions. And we even talked about it. It's like when you're going through so much and you're in survival mode, you just focus on surviving, but you don't realize how much carnage you're leaving behind you. You're actually dealing with the things that you should be dealing with, the things that are creating problems, and you're just digging yourself a deeper and deeper hole. And the moment I was stuck in this hole, because I was like literally so deep in this hole, I'm like, damn, there's nowhere else. So it's definitely a balance for sure. Because again, once you're able to have that radical honesty with yourself, and you, again, I was in different situations where some people were open to having a conversation, and some people were not. And I had to be okay with that because, again, I understand, like, again, also being hurt as well. I understood there's some people where it's like, I had to, like, hey, I forgive you. I genuinely think you made a mistake. But for me and the person like setting that boundary, I can't have you in my life, and like the way I'm going, these values just don't make sense to me.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's again, it's a case by case basis, but again, you need to be having those conversations with yourself. And also for me, I think for me, I had to go back to the foundation of who I am. I'm a very much a God-fearing person where it's like a lot of it too. I was in a space where I was just like, I was talking to the big man upstairs, and I'm like, listen, I'm just gonna leave these situations in your hands.
Yeah.
And because it's something it's funny because I played rugby for most of my life, and one of the things that I was taught from a very young age is like when the game plan doesn't work, you have to go back to the foundations. So literally, the time where I was rediscovering myself, I literally go back to the things that made sense to me. And God has always been one of those things, and it's something I've lost, and that's why my life had been in so much like havoc because I wasn't growing up. So I would have conversations with him one on one, and it's for me because I'd had that experience. Like there's a situation that happened where it's like I prayed about it a week before. The next week, I got a loud, clear answer.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was just like, you have to close that door. Like, there's no...
There's no negotiating that response. There's no...
It's tough because I was struggling with this decision. I was like, how do you... I'm trying to reconcile with, like, but this doesn't make sense. But now that I look back and I'm like, it's crazy because sometimes you have people in your life for such a long time, and that's what's that tethering thing.
Yeah.
And then whenever these situations, God will bring in new people in your life that you've known for less, and it's like you've known them for your whole life because they understand you. That's what I was saying. For most of my life, I felt very misunderstood, and even when answer, that's exactly one of the things he said. Is like, I'm going to be bringing people in your life who are going to understand you, so you don't have to go back to these other people. So it made it easier to kind of let go. But even for me too, like I still struggle with that. Like this is the write in my journal, like, man, like these are people I had in my life for a very long time. And I'm really struggling to let that go. And going back to that vulnerability where it's like, I think the biggest thing is I have a really good group of people around me right now where I can have those conversations. And even for me as a man too, I think it's something I've been talking about too. It's in our society, men showing feelings is seen as a sign of weakness, but it's like you need to show your emotions. Like I cry all the time. Like the past couple of months, I've been crying a lot to release that energy. Like,
because, good for you.
And it's actually one of the things I want to talk about later, where it's like I started this series where I'm like in my feelings, talking about going through these series of feelings that I had, and as a man, you're not allowed to express them.
Yeah,
it's crazy because when the moment I opened up, I've been having the most interesting conversations with other men. Was like, I feel the same way.
Yeah.
Express it. I just needed someone like you, like, can actually relate to express them, like, to make it feel comfortable. So it's like, it's a tough situation to be in because, like, again, you've built all these relationships with these people.
Yeah.
I think Tyler Perry said it the best, and it's something my mom has always said it to me, but he added another layer that I'd never heard. He's like, some people come in your life for a reason. Some people come in your life for a season.
Yeah.
And then he added the thing with the shuttle, the spaceship.
Yeah.
When it takes off, it has all these rockets, right? But for it to go to another level, these rockets have to be left.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. It's like a lot of people don't have conversations with themselves to understand, to discern which are those people that I need to go to the next level, and these people for a reason, and others for a reason. So that's where like I heard that I'm like the rocket thing really blew my mind because I already knew the first half, and I'm like, damn.
Yeah.
Because when you feel when you see it happening in your life, where it's like there've been things I've been able to do in the past couple of months, I've been trying to do for the past 2 or 3 years, and the things that have been holding me back has been like the environment I've been in.
Yeah.
Not being in the environment is a big thing where it's like once you're in that space, it's so much easier for you to go because people are like, yo, like, let's do it.
Yeah.
This I've had right now, my friends are like, even like one of like the other guy around the podcast where he's not even technically he's my boss, but he's not.
Yeah.
One of my good friends out there have been things where I'm like, for example, like I've been trying to start a YouTube channel for a while, and he's like, past 2 months, he's like, you said you the channel last week. What's happening?
Yeah. You get that accountability and
so it's always like pressure on. Even for example, like one of the things, like last year I read a book called The 4 F's of Life, and it talks about the 4 pillars of life. So it's like fitness, family, faith, fun, and finance. And like so that's how my life is being driven right now by those 4 pillars of my life. And he's like, I've been trying to get it back into shape for such a long time, and he's been on my ass about it. And like now I have someone who's driving in who's like, okay, like I'm actually competing like a bodybuilding competition in July. So
nice.
He was one of the first people I told, and he's like, bro, if you're gonna do this, we're not gonna do it, and I'm gonna hold you accountable. You're gonna put every single day of you working out, and we're gonna work out together. And it's a completely different energy that I not want to give up. You have people behind you who are like, dude, like we're gonna run fire with you. And it's something that's very rare. And I think for me, I've been searching for a while.
Yeah.
I've always had that at different stages in my life. I think I just this stage in my life, I just needed to find those people who are willing to run through fires with me. So it's again, like I said, energy is a big thing, and the environment you're in, that's usually what usually kills people.
Yeah.
Not being in the right environment is the big thing.
Yeah. And I'm curious about like why now? So before we get into the other quotes and characters you gave me, you did mention like having had this on your back for like the past 10 years when you now reflect on it, and it's something that you've been thinking about sort of like back of your mind since you were 16. And what's the difference between 16-year-old Stanley besides the age, right? There's obviously the age factor, and we like to give age a lot of credit for the wisdom we acquire, but it's not the case. So I'm just curious to know, why are you more conscious now of the fact that you need a better environment, that you need better people? Whereas probably in your 16-year-old self, I know for me, I was very individualistic. So a lot of the goals that I got, even getting to the point that I am, has been solely based on my efforts, me, what I can do, the races I can run. And because of that, I can work faster than most people in my age group, or I can compete faster than a lot of people in the things that I actually focus on. But at the same time, there's also that thing where at this age now, that's not my concern anymore. I'm really not concerned about how much faster I can go than you. I'm now thinking more along the lines of like, who do I partner with in certain things? Who's my accountability person? How is my environment? Yes, am I doing things despite you, or am I doing things with you? Do you get what I mean? So I'm just wondering, why now for you?
So that's been one of the biggest things I've shared, I think, with a lot of my close friends, and I was even talking to this with my mom. So from a very young age, I always wanted to be a millionaire because I guess the environment I was in, I was like, by the age of 21, I'm going to be a millionaire. Hit 21, didn't happen. I'm like, okay, by the age of 25, I'm going to be a millionaire. But obviously, it hasn't happened yet. So for me, it's been a mindset shift where it's like, instead of me being a millionaire, I want to impact 1 million people's lives. And it's funny because like there's always been things that have drawn me, and I never understood what that was until like I started again like going through life and having like reading more information and absorbing a lot more things. I think that's the difference between 16-year-old and the version of me right now. I've absorbed so much information and been through so many different experiences where I know who I am and what I want to do, and I'm just like peeling different layers of the onion for me. So like that's why, for example, like the things I'm doing, like I realize I have a very big platform and I have a voice that people actually listen to. It's crazy. Like from a young age, my mom was telling me the story. Like she's like, I remember being like in the apartment building we were in, like I was 4, and my mom would never find me at home. She would always find me like at the neighbor's house, and these
Yeah.
people were always older. So like you were always having conversations with neighbors. So you're always like people, and it's something that's been gradually been happening as like I like became older, and like I've always been people have always been drawn to me, and I didn't understand why. It's only like now I'm at a stage where like God has given me this voice to impact other people. And that's the thing, like even my platform, I've been able to do so many different things where it's like on a larger scale, but even on a one-to-one basis, like people have told me like deep and dark secrets about their life, and I have no reason why. And it's not even people
Yeah.
I know,
Yeah.
like random strangers. I remember I was on the SkyTrain the one time, and this guy basically told me his life story, and then never understood why until I asked God about it, because I'm like, why do you have you given me this gift? And like now I'm understanding what that is. And I realized for me, it's even if I can create impact with one person, like you and I having this conversation, is how I'm gonna get that million people where it's like, 5 or 6 other people, they're gonna 5 or 6 other people, and it creates this domino effect. So it's like people often laughed at me when I said that, but I'm like, I am creating impact. It's crazy, for example, like with me even posting every single day, me working out, it's gotten other people to work out, and like they're like
Yeah.
again, it's creating that impact, and that's why for me, I think that's a big difference for me. It's I think now I have found my purpose, and I just didn't know what my purpose was. Because, for example, two of the biggest influences in my life have been Pastor T.D. Jakes and Eric Thomas. And for me, their stories have also been crazy, but I also looked at them and I'm like, I could do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
The environment that I was in didn't make sense. Again, like even if you were to look at me in high school, like this would not have been possible. Me being able to like articulate myself well, like I hated reading. So it's crazy because like we often don't push ourselves, and then I was put in environments that made me do those things, and that's when you realize, oh, I actually can do that. Even for me, like with my youth, I sit and look into the camera all the time, which is so weird. But it's never something I thought I would do. Even maybe picking up a camera and doing photos or something I never had planned to do. Even the whole modeling thing was like, you look at me, I'm not a model, but it's like again, like because I was put in that environment, I realized I had this skill that had been hidden, and I just had to just figure it out. So I think a lot of it too is like I think for me from a young age too, that's also one thing that's never changed. I've always been curious, and I've always been like, what's the worst that could happen? And I've always tried new things. So I think it's been a blessing.
Frozen on my end, sorry.
Yeah. So I think that's what a part of what my outlandish personality has been, like that curiosity, and like trying to like push the envelope a little bit.
Yeah. What you're saying is reminding me of something I heard. I was actually thinking about this in the shower. So all my really big thoughts come out in the shower or like those random
That's time, because actually I'm gonna let you share what you're gonna say. I actually want to say something after that.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna say, when I was in the shower today, I was thinking about something. It was Stephen Furtick who said it. And the thing that I like about listening to people talk is they put in words something that you've never been able to articulate, right? And yeah, it's the reason I like sermons. It's the reason I listen to podcasts. It's like just being able to put into words my feelings and my thoughts. And something he said was around purpose was he struggles with people. So he's got a personality that loves people, which I have as well. And I've recently been having so many conversations with people around that. And his biggest struggle yet is people, which is the same thing as me. My biggest fear, and the reason I even got to this thought is I told you I had a hard time last year. And my biggest fear is sinking back into the same thing again, like just having a cycle of like hard periods and high highs and then a really low lows. So I was just thinking about ways to prevent that. And a big thing that came up for me is my ability to handle people. And the reason I struggle with people, I realized, is people are my purpose. I can't avoid them. So for a very long time, my solution was, oh, people are not doing you good, then fuck people. Just stay by yourself and you isolate yourself, and then, or maybe stick to 1 or 2 people and gain all your experiences from them. That doesn't work. Those 1 or 2 people don't feed me because they're not my purpose. My purpose is to share. So when you're talking, I hear you say impact 1 million people. My entire life, it's the same thing. My mom has the same stories where she's like, you could leave Michelle with anyone and you'll find them bonding. And that magnetism as well is there. And the thing about the magnetism is, as much as it attracts good people, it attracts really, really bad people. And bad people are easier to remember than good people are. So in terms of even the purpose, it becomes distracted by that fear of bad people because your magnetism attracts both, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
And yeah, so when you're talking about purpose, and just how much your purpose is driven towards that, I realize that's where your biggest battles are going to come from. And now you have to make a choice as to whether you live with regrets and you live in the past and you allow that to dictate how you pursue things in future, or yeah.
And that's the thing too. Like I'm gonna say two things, and it's funny. These are two things I've been learning very recently.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, the things you experience are not for you, other people. For me, one of my mentors right now has been going through similar situations that I'm going through, and he's been the reason I've been saying, and he's been able to guide me through it. And I remember he was telling me, like, when he was going through it, he didn't understand why he was going through the situation, and we were laughing about the other day. It's like, this is why I was going through those situations.
It's you.
It's you. And it's funny because those situations I've been going through as well. That now I understand, like, it wasn't for me, but it was for a greater purpose, again, to help other people.
Yeah.
So for me too, like, a lot of it too has been for me. And I heard this thing, I think a couple of weeks ago, where it's like, whatever you believe in, God, the universe, like, it'll keep teaching you, it'll keep you in that same, it's like you're in a classroom, you can't leave that classroom until you learn.
Yeah.
The same thing will keep happening over and over again until you like learn that lesson.
Yeah.
The moment I realized that, I had to take a step, I'm like, wow, like, there's been certain things in my life that have consistently been happening.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
I learned that lesson. And the moment I started learning those lessons, things opened up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing too. I think a lot of people, again, like what you're saying too, like even with you, like having those conversations with yourself in the shower, I was listening to, highly recommend this interview. Kevin Gates on the Big Boy.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to write this down because
I literally just finished watching it.
mm-hmm.
And it's even in one of his lyrics. He's like, I talk to myself because I give myself the best advice. Yeah.
It's so true. Yeah. Yeah.
I think a lot of people just don't spend time with themselves because every single answer you need, you already have.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't spend time with ourselves.
Yeah.
We're scared of dealing with those inner thoughts because a lot of it is very negative, and a lot of it don't. It's very scary to do it by myself. Like for me, I've been in therapy the past couple of months. And therapy is not even like, it's someone just like basically regurgitating your thoughts and just giving you direction you need to go. A lot of the stuff is like, you already know what the issue is. Yeah. For example, when my friend said to me, this is what your issues you've been dealing with for 10 years, I already knew what it was. Yeah. I just needed someone to just like reflect that idea back to me. But had I spent more time with myself, and that's like now, lately I spend a lot of time, for example, in the shower and in the mirror, having conversations with myself, which sounds simple, but I do it because I'm like, you give yourself the best advice because you know what you want. Yeah. If you've taken the time to actually do the work, you know what you want, you know what you need. And in every situation, you know exactly what you should be doing. And it's like, even this gut feeling, I've been spending more time with myself. There've been times where I'm like, I need to stay away from this person, or I need to stay at home, or I need to do, and I didn't know what that was until I started like feeding more of that feeling and listening to it. And I've even been reflecting back, I'm like, if only I'd listened to my feelings and who I was, or what telling me, I would have avoided so many situations. Yeah. Like life becomes easier when you can trust yourself, right? 100%. Like so much easier. But a lot of people can't trust themselves. That's the thing. I'm like, if you can't trust yourself, how? Also, when you trust yourself, you also know how to ask for help. For example, if you know like you have a problem with people, right, or being too much of a people pleaser, then you ask people for help, and I think the struggle with that is people think it's a bad thing to be helpless, and the way like my mentor, the thing he said to me is like, right now it's like when you injure any part of your body, for example, your knee. You're going to be in crutches for a while. Yeah. You need people around you who are going to be your crutches for that specific time so that you can heal. And once you heal, you can walk again. a lot of us try to deal with stuff for ourselves and then often get overwhelmed, and that's the problem. But once you have the right people around who can be a crutch in that time, it's crazy. The things like I was like, the things I'm dealing with now, I was like, I could have done this years ago.
Yeah.
Just address it and had the right people around. So it's like again, like people are just too afraid to be vulnerable and like actually deal with their demons because it's terrifying. But once you have the right people around you and you actively make that choice, I'm like, okay, I'm tired of being in this place. Sometimes it takes you being rock bottom because when you're rock bottom, like the only way is literally up. Well, I have no but to deal with it.
Yeah, and people are afraid of that feeling, like the darkness thing. My brother and I have a shared philosophy that we can't trust people who've never met the worst part of themselves.
Oh yes, 100%.
Because I don't think you can make that decision fully unless you know what you're capable of. So there's a thing where like you keep talking about looking at yourself in the mirror. You don't always like what you see. It's the thing that people don't get. It's like it's not always gonna be a conversation where you look at yourself and you're like, sometimes you really see evil intentions. Sometimes you see a past that's made up of you having victimized yourself and blamed other people. But it was you. There are days when you just know you are to blame for every single thing. And then there are days when you also wake up and you still feel like those old patterns. It's not like, oh, I wake up, I've changed, I've seen God, and all of a sudden everything works out. I still wake up and I'm like, I want those patterns back. Like that's basically what your identity is made up from. And a part of you really liked the negatives as well. And unless you're willing to meet those parts of yourself, like you're not coming out of it, and you can't be trusted. You can't trust yourself. I can't trust you to help me. Like you can't be trusted. Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like it's I think I'm gonna pull it up actually. It's like a quote that I have, and that kind of talks about it, where it's like it's whatever side you keep at bay, basically. Okay, let me see if I can find it. So I'm one of those people who has
a quote for everything.
No, I've always been a quote person. I keep a lot of things.
Yeah.
And like, okay, but basically the story is like it's basically I guess a parable from like an old indigenous teacher, and he's basically like talking about good and evil, and then he describes good and evil, like the dark and the good side of you as these two wolves. And he's like, every single day these wolves are at war with each other. And then his grandson, he's having conversations with his grandson. He's like, which wolf wins? And he's like, the one that you feed the most. So we all have darkness, we all have good inside us. But the only thing that makes a difference is like, what are you feeding the most? And like you said, like for me, the people I have around me, I need to know what your darkness is and what's if you don't even know, I'm not messing around with it. Because like if you don't know, you are able to do some wild stuff and think it's okay. And I'm like, I can't be around that. And it's like, and it's an expectation I have of myself too, where it's like, it has to start with me, and then I can transfer to other people. A lot of people have these expectations that they have on the people, but you don't even have that expectation on yourself. Which is very critical. And I think it's such a pattern in the life that we have right now, because even like, it's a question I've been asking a lot of people. I'm like, when's the last time you spent time with yourself? Like by yourself. You alone with your thoughts. Most people can't even answer that question.
Yeah.
Even another one, like we've been asking this to everyone on my personal podcast, has been, what makes you happy?
And people really know.
Can't answer that question. Yeah. And even for me, I have to take. I'm one of those people. I have to take them like, what makes me happy? Because once you know what makes you happy, it also makes you know what makes you sad.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't have those internal conversations with themselves, and that's the thing too. What a lot of people think that answer has to be the same. Again, like what made me happy when I was 16 and what makes me happy now, completely different. You go through different experiences, you make mistakes, you achieve a lot of things. I'm like, man, this is not what I want. Like for me, again, like the whole $1 million thing was coming from a place where like I'd been in life where like out of lack, but I realized like even with money, you can still be unhappy. I've seen it. I've been in rooms where I've met most successful people, and they tell you, bro, like money doesn't solve your problems. Like they're still unhappy. They would work all the time. And And it's something I've seen personally in my life where it's like people chase this career, this goal, and all this money at the expense of like things that are important to you, like family or being able to spend time with the people you care about. Because I'm like, at the end of the day, like going back to like again, like what we're talking about, we're all going to die at one point.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you going to be able to be happy with the life that you've lived?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think about that every single day. I'm like, am I happy with the decisions I'm making every single day?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that like that lack of perception of mortality is a huge thing in our society. And I don't know if it's because of I know kids feel like that. Like kids have this sense of being invincible. They can do anything and they don't think that it will kill them, right? But for some reason it seems to be lasting longer and longer with each generation that comes. I don't know, like when I talk to my parents, there's a defined fear of not death as such, but a fear of an end. Like I can hear them when they're speaking, and I can tell that they know that there's an end. I don't hear that a lot from people that we talk to in our generation. Like with my friends or with acquaintances, there's no sense of. And I was saying this to you earlier about a podcast episode I recorded previously. Shout out to David for that one. But that one was difficult for people to listen to because it had hearse in the quote, and obviously people avoid topics around death, and he really like tackled it head on, which I do a lot as well, because like you're talking about with listening to people who have made it in life and then figure out that, oh no, this is not what I want, and it's like 3 wives later, or have ruined 16 lives and what. I have this like innate fear that I could go tomorrow
100%.
and I will have to live with the fact that what I did up until now, I can't make amends for.
Yeah.
So even when I'm doing something, and I call it a fear of God, I don't call it a fear of death. I think I fear God more than anything before I do something. Because there are days when, like you say, there's that dark side that's like penetrating. And before I do it, I can actually hear like a voice that's like, mm-mm.
You don't think about, because I guess again going back, people are afraid of dealing with those dark thoughts. I think for me, it's always been a thing I've always thought about, because for me, from a very young age, I remember bearing like a lot of like my peers and like a lot of good friends at a very young age. So like death had been happening around me, and it's crazy because I think a lot of times people have this perception that we all die old, but that's not every day, and it's everyone dying. And I think that's the thing where it's like I think that also became very apparent during the pandemic, because I saw so many people die, and it's something I've been rehearsing. Like I wake up every day with an attitude of gratitude, because I realize I don't know when my last breath might be.
Yeah, yeah.
And it might be today.
Yeah.
I've seen it happen. And that's why, like, for me, like, now I make it a thing. I call my loved ones on a regular basis. I do all the things I want to do. Like, I work out, I do everything as much as I can. I can't do it because I realize I might walk out after this interview, God forbid, walk out by bus or weird stuff like that happen. We'll have a heart attack. It happened all the time.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter, like, how healthy you are. Like, when it's your time, and you don't know when your time is. So that's why you have to give every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's it. A lot of people don't realize that every single day that you have is a gift.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in the grand scheme of things, when you look at life in that perspective, you're more grateful of the things that you have. Okay, yes, I don't have the bag that I want, or the Rolls Royce, or whatever car that I want, whatever that thing is. When you look around you, we have way more to be grateful. Like I remember, like even during this hard time, I was shooting this event. And it was funny because the event was similar to like it was in a space I would be normally with like one of my friends. So it was like it's like damn, the universe, God has a sense of humor. Like, oh, this is such after what's just been happening. And honestly, like the flash on my battery, I used like AA battery, so that I have rechargeables, but I didn't bring them this time. So I had to go to like London Drugs and like get new batteries. And as I'm walking to London Drug, I had this gut feeling. I just stopped and I see this homeless guy on the street. And I'm like, yes, my life is crazy right now, but I have so much more in my life than this person. And he was so happy. He was like, so happy. Hey, and I'm like, and I end up giving money. I'm like, look at the perspective. Like he has way less in his life, but he's so much happier. But he has, and I have way more. And I'm like, when the grand things, yes, the things that are happening suck.
Yeah.
But I have way more to be grateful for. So I'm like, like when you think about that every single day, I'm not saying don't deal with the emotions of the things that are happening. But I'm like, when you have that perspective, I'm like, I have, again, same thing. I have 2 eyes, 2 hands, 2 legs. I can, and it's funny. I was listening to something, I think yesterday, where Steve Harvey was like, yes, you've been through problems, but you had 100% success rate because you're still here.
Yeah.
And I thought about it, like, that's actually true. You never think about it like that, but I'm like, yes, you've had problems, but you've been able to overcome them. Hasn't been the way you want, but no, but you have 100% success rate of problems.
Yeah.
I think, like just adopting an attitude of gratitude is one thing like, I'm grateful for. I'm like, not knowing when I'm gonna die, and I'm like, that's why for me, I'm like, I'm gonna try to do as much as I can before I die, and I'm hoping to die at 100, but I mean that's not up until then. I have a little bit of time to make the stuff I need to do happen.
Yeah. I mean, I want to come back to something that you said earlier, and you sort of like skirted over the topic of it being like different for men and women, and I don't think we talk about this enough. But I was watching a Simon. Well, we do talk about it, but I think we talk about it from the attack. And I try to avoid those conversations because people end up like attacking each other, and But anyway, I was watching a Simon Sinek interview. So shout out to Diary of a CEO. I'm an addict. I watch every episode.
I recommend it to everyone. Great podcast.
No, honestly, Stephen Bartlett has changed my life single-handedly.
That's why for me, there's a couple of podcasts I recommend to you. I'm like, that one. And I think also who he interviews, I'm like, it's people you've heard from before, but the in which you hear it, I'm like, it's wild.
Yeah, exactly. And he's brought so much vulnerability himself, and I just appreciate it so much. But anyway, he was talking to Simon Sinek recently. I think this is the third time he's actually been on. And Simon is one of those people that I enjoy listening to because I've watched him evolve. Like, because he started off with a very almost like very alpha type approach to things. And I know he got a lot of criticism back when he was talking about marketing and what. But now his mind is more centered around giving back. And this conversation that we're having was around loneliness, and I think now he's starting to get to that point where he's like, I want a relationship, I want a lasting relationship, and he was just reflecting back on like the things that he's done or the ways that people haven't met him halfway in the times that he's actually tried out. But something that he kept on hammering in on is he has this rule with his friends that we don't cry alone. So he was like, I do not allow my friends to cry alone. Whatever time it is, if you need to cry, phone one of us. So I don't remember how many he said they are, whether it's like a group of 6 or whatever. And I think for him, I think for him that came from accepting vulnerability and from experiences that he had had, because he seems to have transitioned from wanting that like crowd of people with money around him and more service givers. So he was just saying that previous relationships haven't worked for him because the people that he meets are not they're not service givers. They don't have something greater than just I'm a corporate, I'm a bad corporate bitch type thing, but they don't have anything that they're giving back to the world outside of that. And that you never cry alone thing is just like a really significant sign of how much service that he's now in a space to give. But I was also looking at it from the lens of masculinity and how that's something that I'm just wondering how that conversation would even go, like in a group of guys, because we see guys obviously from in a mixed group. Like I have one-on-one conversations with a lot of boys, and it's different from when I see them in a group. And the impression I always get when men get into groups is there's a level of pretense, and I have to have my shit together in a way that I don't see when they're talking to us on a one-on-one level. And this is not in like romantic relationships. That's a different dynamic. I mean, from a friendship perspective, there's a vulnerability that you would bring to a conversation with me that I don't necessarily see when you're talking to each other. But also at the same time, there's some things you can't say to me because I just won't understand them. So I wonder where you guys end up talking about those things, or if you talk about them at all. And yeah.
And I think that's where the thing is too, where it's like, I think for me, that's going back to what I was saying, like, that's why I've been using my platform. Like, for me, and it's crazy, like, the impact I was able to create when I shared what I shared. Like, for me, a constant thought I have in my head is, I'm not supposed to be here. Which is a weird thing to say, but like, if I tell you I've almost committed suicide 4 times in my life, the last one literally being like 2 months ago. And that's something where it's like, if I hadn't had people around me who cared about me, I wouldn't be. And it's a conversation that, like you said, a lot of men don't have it, because even I was watching a lot of podcasts too, on Black Lives, where like men were talking about it. It's like a lot of it too. The problem comes from the previous generation before that and the generations before that. A lot of that has never been modeled to us. If we look at, for example, especially in the African context, men don't talk about emotions. In the African context, like, they make so many mistakes, but they never sit down with their sons and have those conversations. Whereas, like, from what I gather, you've had conversations with your mom, like, this is what like womanhood is like, these are the mistakes I've had. A lot of men don't have that. And now there's been this shift where it's like, we are especially in the era where like people are actually talking more about mental health. Now we are the first generation of men figuring it out, which is very difficult. And it's crazy because for me, the reason why I'm so passionate about this and I'm doing the things that I'm doing, there's an 80% suicide rate amongst men. Largely because, and it's a lot of the things I found, not having a safe space where I can express these thoughts. Like, I'm lucky, for example, like when things that happen, like with my mentor and my big brother, it's like when something happened, I was able to go to him and just cry, and he just listened, and we cried, simple things like that. And for me, that it's becoming a normal thing where it's like, one of my favorite podcasts at the time was called I Am Athlete, where they were really big on mental health, where like they would do every beginning of the episode, do mental checks. How are you doing mentally? How are you doing financially? How are you doing with relationships? And it was weird to me, and I was intrigued by it. I'm like, why is this weird to me? And I realized this is something I'd never seen before. And I'm doing that more often too, like now with my male friends, where like we do have those conversations. The people around me, we do have those conversations. And we're trying to make it the normal thing, because it's a simple thing to talk about your feelings. But I'm like, and it's crazy, like, it's one of the projects I'm doing. I'm actually, I have designed t-shirts to kind of tackle that and like fund, like, I'm going to be selling a men's group to kind of create safe spaces for men, because there isn't a safe space where, for example, if I want to talk about my feelings, where I can talk about it. It can be things like the things that are stressing me at work, or is it the things that are in my relationship? And when I made the post that I made, I wasn't just talking from the perspective of a Black male, but I was talking from the perspective of men in general, because I've had these conversations with different men. So many people reached out to me that were men, but the weirdest thing was like, way more women reached out to me. They're like, for example, how do we even notice the signs? How do we know? And that's like, for me, I was in spaces where like a lot of the people I had around me didn't understand, and it didn't feel like a safe space for me to communicate that. And that's why I end up being in these holes where it's like, again, like I'm saying, it's crazy. Like I had to then analyze it. Why is it like I was in relationships, or like in like, around people where I'd known them for such a long space of like a long period of time? Why did I struggle to have those conversations? But then I would meet people within 3 or 4 weeks, and I'm able to have these conversations and even tell them more than I told people that I'd known for long. And it was because they were able to create that safe space. And that's something we as men, we don't talk about it. We need love too. We need to be heard. If you want to kill a man, that's the one thing, you don't make him feel loved and respected. And that differs for every single man. But it's like, again, like this whole toxic masculinity thing, like that's been happening, where it's like men don't show emotions. That's bullshit. I think there's nothing wrong with emotions. It's what you do with those emotions. Like for me, like again, like I'm saying, like one of the reasons I was even able to survive, like even all these stints of like me trying to commit suicide, fitness and health has always been a thing. And I love being in nature and me journaling. Every time I had those thoughts, I'd go for a run.
Yeah.
Something I did regularly during the pandemic, and even before that, and even just sitting in nature, and just like sitting down.
Yeah.
And I think it's a conversation that we need to be having. And it's not just for men to have those conversations, but you as women too. I think I always say this to a lot of my female friends, any woman I come, when was the last time you had a conversation with a man and asked him, how are you doing? With men, with anyone else, like, and genuinely ask them, how are you doing? And giving them that space to actually communicate how they feel. Because we always ask that question, but no one actually genuinely wants to know how are you.
Yeah.
And especially like women asking that question, like oftentimes we always ask you that and give you that space, but when was the time you reciprocated that? And that could be your father, your brother, your significant other, even just like a male friend. That's something you have to do, because like that's why we don't open up, because a lot of it, there hasn't been that space created. And it's funny, I was watching something, it's like often when you ask men what is bothering them, and the thing is our bodies will snitch at every single time and we'll say the general thing, nothing.
Yeah, it shows.
I always say to my female friends, have you ever probed and be like, I don't think. And again, it also depends on like, have you been able to curate that safe space? For some people, again, like I've had this conversation, a lot of like my female friends, like who are in relationships in particular, it's like some men need more time because of how they're being raised and like just the traumas that they have. Some people are not ready to deal with that. But it goes back to what I was saying before. A lot of people haven't had those conversations with themselves. And then they go into relationships, being it platonic or romantic relationships, and they're unable to communicate that. Because for me, like now, one thing I in any relationship I'm in right now, I struggle with vulnerability. It's one of the things to say, hey, I struggle with vulnerability. This is why I need a safe space for me to communicate this. Why? Which is something I wasn't able to do before because I didn't even know it was a problem. So again, I can't blame the people that I had in my life before that. But also at the same time, like they didn't create safe spaces for me to be open about the things I'm dealing with. Because I'm like, what has really been the biggest change? Like obviously I have changed, but I'm like, there's people around who I'm like, I've known for like 3 weeks. I'm able to communicate as opposed to like 8 years, which is weird, but that's how it happened. And it's a conversation that I'm having. And I think like all the followers, like for me, any of the men are struggling with vulnerability, don't have a safe space, please stay plugged in with my profile and the things I'm going to be doing, because that's a conversation that needs to be had. And again, like I'm not saying again like women don't have their own issues, but I think it's also just being brushed under the rug, because I'm like, different conversation to even have, because it's like, oh, like the men issue is not as bad, but I'm like, when you look at how high the rates are, crazy. And for me personally, because like I said, like I'm not supposed to be here. It's a conversation I constantly have with myself. I'm lucky I had people, but it's like last year I was in a fraternity. Last year I lost one of my fraternity brothers due to like an overdose. The thing is, I realized a lot of men who are in those situations end up building negative habits that force us to, like, we're dealing with so much pain and that we just numb it. And that's the thing we can do. I'm fortunate I was able to find like healthier like ways of coping, but like for me, I could have easily gone either way. Like I'm lucky I've never tried drugs. Not that I judge anyone who does, but I understand why people do. And even if you look at it, I could be wrong. If you look at the stats of like overdoses, I'm pretty sure it's men. And it's crazy. It's happened so often. Like literally 2 weeks ago, I was getting a haircut, and my barber said something that killed me. And I'm like, and this is why I'm so passionate. But he's like, yeah, bro, I really love what you're doing, and like there's a conversation that needs to be had. One of my clients, who's a cop, was at the gun range one day to pull the gun on himself. And these are stories that are happening regularly, but these conversations aren't being had, and I don't understand why. But this is why I'm using my platform to talk about these things, because like my t-shirt says, men have feelings too. The back will say, thank you for asking about my feelings. Because just that simple act has so much power, but people don't even ask.
I mean, so I I spend majority of my life around men, right? So I come from that like those one of those females who generally connects with men better, and has all those considerations in the back of my mind. Maybe like action wise, it doesn't always come through the way it's supposed to, which is where I'm going with this. Where I'm going with my question. Um, but in the back of my mind, there's that sense of understanding that men have it pretty hard in terms of how society um, talks, like the narrative. And yes, from a practical day-to-day basis, we can debate on whether men or women have it harder in terms of
Yeah.
like what we go through at work or what we like. That's a debate for another day. And I also don't like taking a side on that one because my life is hard for me. But the guy, like you just mentioned, the homeless guy on the street will look at my life and be like, yo, bro, I would take that any day. It's perspective, right? So yeah, that it's a weird conversation to even have to say whose life is harder. But where I'm going with this is more of coming from a female who's sort of who tries to
Yeah.
understand, right? Like even in terms of the relationship dynamics, be it platonic, be
Mhm.
it romantic, be it with my brothers, I have that level of sympathy for man's strife. I don't understand it, but I sympathize with it.
100%.
And you keep talking about like creation of safe spaces. And I'm like, okay, in your case, it might be easier for you to conceptualize what a safe space for a man is, maybe now. I don't think you'd have been able to do that 2 years ago as well, because you didn't even really know what you needed.
Yeah.
But how do people who don't understand you necessarily create a safe space for you? Because I think this whole idea of wanting to understand people, I think is off the mark. We want to do things for people after we understand why
Yeah.
they need it. I don't think that's what we should be aiming for. Do it before you understand it and get to working on it and whatever and understanding later on. But
Yeah.
how do I create a safe space without fully understanding what you're going through as a man? Because I never will. Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's I say this with any movement. I think this is one of the flaws of most movements. It's supposed to be the people who have the problem
Yeah.
leading on how to create those safe spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of women have. That's one of the things. The biggest question I've gotten from a lot of them, like, how do we even help? And I'm like, talk to men.
Mm-hmm.
We will give you the answers. Like, talk to like what a safe space is different. My safe space will be different to like my cousin's safe space. It's very different. But a lot of it too is like there's a lot of things that are actually being done to help. Like for example, that's one of the reasons why I'm doing the t-shirts because a lot of people are like, how do I help? I can't necessarily have those conversations. It's difficult. I'm like, okay, this is a project I'm running to fully fund the men's groups and all the things I'm going to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people just don't ask. Like for example, like again, like you have those conversations where it's like, okay, there's also Google. Like for example, like how to have a conversation with men. Like these resources are there. It's a me example of trying to like understand the strife of women. I could never understand, right? Or like fully lead that. It's I can't lead that.
Yeah, yeah.
All I can do is like help you guys partner with that. So you don't have to necessarily lead, but it's just creating a safe space is easy.
Mm,
Creating a space where you can be heard without judgment. That's the easiest thing to do.
mm. Yeah.
A lot of women, and it's funny, it's also like the way society is and the things that we see. When we see the type of man that a woman wants in movies, and when you think about it in real life,
Two different things.
I'm like,
Yeah,
it's the unicorn.
yeah,
I'm with it because I'm like, you want a guy who's over 6 feet, making
yeah,
this money. He has to be jacked.
yeah.
He's top of the world. All these things, right? And I think this is part of the problem. And then me, I'm physically can never be 6 feet or whatever the case, and I'm trying to fit in to this box. And I'm like, when you look at, for example, this is why I kind of liked Ghost as a character because he was a realistic character. Yes, he had a past, he had done all these things, and he was trying to change. Like you could see his flaws.
Mm,
I think a lot of the time it's we're trying to live up to this unattainable goal of what a man is. That
yeah.
is unrealistic
Mm,
because a lot of times you find them like, okay, like women say they want a man's man, but then there's too much of it. Like he's too alpha. Like you have the Andrew Tates of the world, but he would be considered the alpha, like a man's man. So it's funny, like the goalposts are always changing, and we never really understand that. And also, too, like I'm saying, it's very difficult because men, for a lot of it, there's a lot of men who come from like broken homes or single families, or even if they have a father present, he's not modeling what manhood is.
Yeah.
So I think for a lot of like, especially men in our generation, we're that generation that has to break that curse and figure it out. But also what that means, like women also have to be gracious with us because we're figuring out what no one has shown us the way. We're paving the way, and that's gonna mean like we're gonna make mistakes. We're going into uncharted territory, so it's gonna be difficult. It's different from what a man is gonna be for me and my son. It's very different because I'm gonna actually, like, have this conversation. Because it's funny, I have this conversation with my cousins all the time where it's like, whenever we would sit down and have conversations with our dads or uncles, they would never really have conversations. They would be like, in Shana Kuro, and it would basically be like, wait until you become an adult and then you understand. But I'm like, no.
Yeah, I need to know.
Like, hey, listen, this is stuff. And the funny thing is, even as kids, we know all the dirty laundry. We see it. It's out. Like, hey, listen, this is a mistake I made. I need you. This is why I made that mistake. And it's funny too, like now, this is also where the empathy comes into. Like now that I've become older, for example, between my parents, I understand why my mom is hurt in certain situations, but also as a man, I understand like, this is why my dad, because as a man, this would annoy me too. But I think a lot of it too, a lot of people have those conversations. And my biggest advice is to a lot of women, have conversations with men. Women get advice about men from women, which makes
the group chat.
I'm like, for example, you're in a relationship, you have an issue with your boyfriend, right?
Yeah.
Why are you going to talk to your friends about it instead of talking to the person who?
It really doesn't help. Yeah.
And this is what creates a lot of problems. Like for me, I've been in those type of situations. For me, even with my male friends, obviously I'll give them advice. I'm like, listen, at the end of the day, your relationship is yours, and there's some dynamics I will never understand. You be having that conversation with your significant other, or even with friends. This applies to friendships as well. Coming to me to talk about Bob.
Yeah.
You have an issue. My first question is like, have you even had that conversation with him?
With him, yeah.
90% of the time, people haven't had those conversations.
Yeah.
Because then now you're trying to have a conversation from a female perspective about a man when you don't even understand.
Yeah, where you'll be coming from. Yeah.
And that's the problem. Like that's one of the biggest things where I've seen this pattern happen with women. And that's one of the ways that you're now creating safe spaces where it's like you're talking to your friends about me instead of coming to have a conversation with me about it. I'm the one issue. Because don't have that conversation, half the time it's able to be solved. Sometimes we need to come back to it. Or sometimes then you have to then like seek for help. Like again, like I'm a big person like therapy. Like for me, having done different types of therapy, even as a man, there's situations where I didn't understand what my significant other, the issues they were having until I heard their perspective.
Yeah.
And I was just like, damn, this is what you meant.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing, that's the biggest problem. Like I would never understand the way women think we're wired differently.
Yeah.
Women think more emotionally, men think more logically, right?
Yeah.
Half the disconnect comes when women are trying to connect with men. It's like, you're bringing me your emotion. I'm not going to understand that. But if you say, hey, I'm upset because this made me feel this, and that, it's easy to understand. It's like one of the things I laugh about with my friends is social media has ended so many relationships. And it's so funny, for example, like a lot of women complain that men don't like their photos or they like other girls' photos or whatever the case may be. For us, it's such an innocent act. It's just like, like I liked it. Like there's no. Sometimes there is a flirty thought. Sometimes there isn't. It's just like, I just like the photo. That's it. Be a friend, or I just like the way it was taken. Especially for me, it's felt like this is just a fire photo.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Often the issue has been when women are communicating, you didn't like my photo, my friend saw you like me. I'm like, I'm not gonna say, but I'm like, hey, like, when you like someone else's photo, it makes me feel this type of way because it makes me feel like I'm not valued or whatever the case may be. Everyone is different.
Mm-hmm.
Then I understand if I genuinely care about it, then I can do it. But often the times it's like, why are you liking that photo? Or why are you doing this and that? And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to understand the emotion. But if you try explain it from a logical point of view,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to make it easier. But at the same time, too, as a man, I also have to meet you halfway. And that's the thing. You have to meet you halfway. I'm like, if I care about you and this is something that's bothering you, I'm
Mm-hmm.
obviously going to try and make amends about it. But I think that's the problem where it's like people often have screaming matches and there's like miscommunication and we just
Yeah.
don't. And that's what I'm saying. Again, instead of you talking to the guy about it, you're going to go talk to, oh my gosh, I can't believe he liked Sally's photo, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and which is often funny because I'm like, other guys like your photo too. That's not an issue. But I'm like, so like where is the standard here? And that's the thing where there's a lot of hypocrisy in certain things. And it's funny because I have a lot of like female friends and I talk about it with my female cousins all the time where it's like there has to be a set standard. Like we can't just be like creating standards for certain people and then everyone else just like gets away with it. I think that's where the problem is having these conversations. I think that's the biggest thing. I think a lot of miscommunication happens because people aren't having conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
They only go on like non-platonic. Just have a conversation. If you genuinely care, that's how you create safe space for any group of people.
Yeah.
Have the uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah. And well, safe spaces are co-created, right? It's one of those, and I think you've sort of like alluded to it as well when you're talking that as much as I can ask questions, like for women, for example, I don't think, typically speaking, most women do ask questions. There might be questions that were like leading, we already know the answer we want from, but questions are asked. So there's that sense of, okay, even when questions are asked though, the kind of answer you get back is also in some way feeds into the safe space that you want. You get it? So safe spaces are co-created. I've had scenarios where I ask questions in the best way that I can, and the answer you get is a little snappy. So next time you stop asking, and then you just don't create that safe space. Now a person doesn't feel like they can be vulnerable because they're not asked. But you used to ask and you get like snaps back. So it also really depends on where you are as a person, like the ability to have safe spaces. And sometimes I wonder how much we attribute that to like new people when we should maybe be attributing it to the place we are in our lives where I'm now able to see the safety that was always there. Like safety was always there, but I'm now able to see it.
That's the thing. Like we're constantly changing. Like for me, like I'm saying, like, and it's crazy how growth happens too. Oftentimes it could be 2 weeks, 3 months, and I think people breed in friendships and relationships need to be constantly having those check-ins, like monthly or quarterly, or like you do this with everything. Like with businesses, they have like quarterly check-ins and whatever. And I think a lot of like often from speaking from the perspective of a man, a lot of the times when women ask questions, I don't think you're ready for the answer. That's a part of the problem where it's like the two-way street. When someone is asking you the question, the person being asked has to be open to give an answer. I think that's I felt like being vulnerable is something I felt for a very long time, and I didn't even know it was a problem, right? But also one of the things that has made me not want to open up has been like, can the person really accept what I'm about to say to you? And that's often the problem where it's like people think the answer is always like like comes in like a little bow and it's wrapped up nicely, but I'm like, no, it's not always like it's crazy. So for example, I was talking to my cousin. One of the issue that her boyfriend had vocalized that she had gained a lot of weight and he wasn't as attracted to her as before. Not that he didn't like her, he wasn't as attractive. And then she was very offended. And I was like, I even had to explain like the fact that he even had the courage to have that conversation was like, he's gone through so many scenarios and he's thought he's like, I'm gonna do this. But I'm like, how do I say it without being offensive, but still expressing what I need to express? She was really offended by him even asking. Then I was like, okay, on the flip side, you're attracted to what you're attracted. If he had gained X amount of weight, like let's say he went from being the super slender guy to like, and then he gains like he's like now 300 pounds. Like not I'm saying, but I'm like attraction is different. Would you still be okay with that? And she's like, no. So I'm like, so why are you upset with this scenario?
Yeah.
You know, like that's part of the problem where it's like a lot of the time women can voice certain things and men can't. Like there's this disparity that happens there. And I'm like, but I'm like, this is what I'm saying. If you genuinely, again, like it also like there's this fine line with how it's communicated. And I was saying to me, like, because she explained to me the way he explained it, I was like, this was a very loving thing and he genuinely cares. And he didn't even say like, oh, you're gained on not. It's like, listen, like I think also in terms of like your health, this is not a healthy lifestyle. Like let's find things like let's go out and work together. Like let's change your diet. Let's meal prep. This all. And he actually had come up with solutions. It wasn't just like, oh, you've gained weight. I'm not attracted. That's not where it ended. So it's this weird thing where it's like, you know, like again, going back to what I was saying, like there's certain lines that are crossed by some genders and can be crossed by others. It's a weird thing. But I think if you look at it from the human level, the fact that I'm even having this conversation with you means I genuinely care about you. When you think about it with the people you don't care about, and you're like, ah.
Yeah, it'll be like, fuck it. Yeah.
You have to live with you. Like, I realized one thing. I read Charlemagne's book, Black Accent, and he's like, at the end of the day, it's not your responsibility on how the person responds, but it's your responsibility to say what you need to say.
Yeah.
For me, like when I was in with past relationships, I had gained so much. Like this is the heaviest I've been in my life, and for me, like people kept saying to me, "You gained weight, blah blah blah," and I would get offended. But when I really thought about it, I'm like, I really did, and they genuinely cared about me. This is what it was. Let me do something about it, and that's what this whole like weight loss thing was about. It's like me, like people who cared about me noticed that, and me actually. But if I then stayed in that space of offense, because like I'm saying, like again, if you have conversations with yourself, you know when something,
you know
when you try to fit those patterns. I'm like, damn, like these don't.
And usually by the time people around you start seeing it, it's also because of the way you're treating yourself. Like Jordan Peterson talks about even the way you walk, that people around you can sense you're defeated simply because the way you walk has changed. So by the time I register that Stanley is going through a rough time, it's because you already look defeated. So you already know.
And like now me then getting offended by someone who genuinely cares about it has noticed something about it. And I think like, going back to what I said and something I've been learning, especially from this book, when you're in that space of radical honesty with yourself on a regular basis and you, again, talk to yourself, you have these conversations in the mirror, I'm not going to be offended by that comment. Because again, going back, there's a visible difference. The pants that I hadn't worn in like almost 2 years, I put them on, I'm like, damn. These shoes. And so that's the thing. I think a lot of it too, it's like, obviously it has to come from a place of love, but I think these uncomfortable conversations need to be had because a lot of the issues I feel like we're having in the world now, a lot of people are just not having conversations, especially amongst different groups.
I mean, let's talk about Ghost for a second. I think he's a nice segue around the masculinity or identity thing. I've struggled with that character quite a lot. Like, so for context, I watched Power season 1 and no, I watched season 1 and I left it on season 2 because I didn't like the Ghost, Tasha, and what is his side chick's name? Sorry? I could not deal with that dynamic. But yeah, Ghost is an interesting character because I generally like villains. So I'm more likely, like even on Empire, I'm more likely to like Lucius than I am anyone else. But with Ghost, so explain to me why Ghost. Like you alluded to him a little bit in the sense that he's an imperfect character. But yeah, why Ghost?
I think he's the reason I like because he was a very, I feel, realistic portrayal of what a man goes through. Even for example, with infidelity, him trying to leave this old lifestyle to better, and like even like it's a struggle I think a lot of men have, and it's a struggle I could relate to a lot of the struggle. And like I've had those thoughts. I mean, like even the whole like you can be in a relationship and still like be attracted to other girls and then stop. You like he ended up doing it, but it's I think a lot of it too. It talks about like a lot of people look up at the infidelity, but they never look at the aspect of he was in a relationship with someone who wasn't supposed to be his soulmate. you never think about that. And it's like, but how did you get in that situation, right? And it's like, okay, before I get into married someone, I need to have the conversation. Like, is this the person that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with? Is this my
Yeah.
life? And not only that for him, like he again started out right from the bottom, was able to change his life. Obviously, he sold drugs or whatever, but then he got to a point of like, this is not sustainable, and this is not what I want to do. And he wanted to leave the life because if you see, like I think up until like season 3 and 4, he's trying to make these changes,
Mm.
but people keep bringing him back.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
also, like you realize too, like oh, he's physically killing people, but it's like sometimes in life you have to be the villain, and it's crazy. I heard this quote the other day. Like sometimes you have to be the villain in someone else's story to be the hero in yours.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If I'm making everyone happy with things I'm doing, I'm clearly doing something wrong. If I'm not
Yeah.
wrong, it's
Yeah.
like I'm not saying God and be an asshole, but if you look at to the core of who he is as a person, he had to make those uncomfortable decisions. But it's also like he also had like a swagger about like the fact that he was able to just like
Yeah.
for me it was the tattoos, the suits, the swagger. There was just something about him. I'm like, man, he reminded me of my grandfather. Like this is the swagger that he had, and he just like the confidence. I think that's what it was.
Mm.
Him being himself. And I think it goes back to one of the quotes I saying is like, be yourself and let the world adjust.
Mm.
In every decision that he made, he was okay with it. And he was able to take the repercussions of what he was going to do.
Yeah. It's interesting that you're saying that, right? Because when I watch Ghost, I see a lot of confusion. And I see a lot of like trying to fix things that have paused. So that was my thing even with the Angela and Tasha dynamic, where Tasha is really like ride or die, right? And she's typically a win for most people. Like she's by any standard, she's whatever, quote unquote wifey material, but by any standard, just a really good person to have on your side. And she's stayed that way for a while until she couldn't anymore, until Ghost had done enough for her to be like, you know what, now I have to just look out for my kids. Um, and then Angela came in and she was like something from the past, and what it felt like for me with Ghost was he spent his entire life trying to have a rerun of something that has passed. So even with Angela, it was like he was trying to get that scholarship back. I think they introduced that a little later where it's like they were supposed to go to the same school and he was going to be a lawyer as well had he not gone that thug way. And so yeah, there's just something about him that gives me a sense of living with regret and so much regret and then bringing it into the future.
I think
That,
for me, it's I agree with a lot of what you said, but I think a lot of it too is like on paper,
mm,
it was the right woman.
mm,
I think Angela was a safe space. And I think that's what it was. And I think a lot of people, like you said, again, like they don't really allude to what happens, like Ghost's past, and I think they're doing it in future seasons. We never really find out what stopped Ghost and Angela from being together. And I think
mm.
like that's like they had met when like, around that same period too. So it's like I think a lot of what that was a lot of people settle.
Yeah,
They don't go for what they want and they just settle. And then it gets to a point where like that old thing comes back and then they do live with that regret. But then it's like now it's like you're in this space where it's like I can't go back to what I wanted, but I've settled to this weird state where it's like that's my perspective of it. Like of course, again on paper, Tasha was great,
mm,
but it wasn't like what he wanted in his life. He had settled, and it happens a lot of time in life where it's like we settle for a lot of things and we don't really have a conversation. Then like you wake up one morning, that's where regret comes from. Like I think for me, I realized after high school, I looked back and I'm like, damn, like there's so many things I could have done. I was like, I played rugby. Like I like again, I was a prefect. I did all this. I had all these accolades, but I looked back and I'm like, damn, like I didn't live life fully had I just applied myself more. Because I'm like, I look at it, I'm like, in hindsight, I'm like, I could have done so many different things, right?
yeah,
So coming back like now to the second part of my life, I was like, I'd rather try stuff and it fail
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
than live my life with regret because I know what that feels. And a lot of people again just don't try stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's I think that's where that was. I think that's where like that regret came from of him like thinking what would have happened if I had done it.
yeah, yeah.
So I'm again, he's a very complex character because again, I think it's a very human thing where it's like a lot of people's relationships still look back at like their ex or like someone else and like so it's that thing. It could be a man or a woman. It just so happened that in that case, but also too like again, she also and Tasha also ended up like doing wild stuff too. So it's like who's really the villain? Like they're both villains, and that's what I love about the show because like everyone is a villain in some sense, and that's what humanizes it. Because like, again, like going back to what you said, it's like there's good and bad in all of us. It's just some a better at taming the good. And I think a lot of it too is like a lot of people hide the bad. Because even for me, that's one thing I realized I've always been like the good guy. When I realized it's like someone was saying to me, like this, the good guys are the most dangerous because they're good at hiding what are broken. So that's why for me, I'm more open to who I am, and I'm like I don't have everything figured out, and like it humanizes people. But
Yeah.
because good and bad is very subjective.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because again, killing,
Sorry?
for example, like killing someone at war is a bad act. You have to do it because it's the confines of war. But me randomly going out in the street and stabbing someone and killing them is completely different.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all about perspective and the situation. But that's one thing I realized: like good and bad is I don't
It's relative. Yeah.
I don't focus on that. It's because there's this never-ending conversation about that.
Yeah. And even when you look at someone like Ghost, like from how you're explaining him, I'm getting the sense of he did good for himself. Like he stopped living with regret. And I'm just thinking about how much of our mental health is based on that, on doing good by others and versus doing good for ourselves and realizing that, yeah, okay, I might have dug myself a pit and I might have 3 kids already, but I have to dip. Like there's that part of me that knows this is not it.
And that too, like again, like I'm not saying what he did was right because then like he ended up he did. I don't think he also fully thought of what he was doing because
Yeah.
now with the spin-offs you see his kids falling back into the same trap again. Going back to what I was saying, that's why I love the show because it humanizes a lot of the things that we're feeling, especially where it's like had he sat his son down or his kids down and like, hey, this is a situation, this is why.
Yeah.
This is still a difficult situation, yes, but it's different because like they're able to understand. And then like when Tariq that age, you realize, I understand that. And he can then like not fall into the traps that he did. I'm like, don't live with regret, don't end up spending your time with the wrong partner. Because again, these are a lot of conversations again, a lot of people don't have. They see you realize life is not black and white. There's a lot of gray areas. Depending on how you grew up, sometimes you see a lot more of the black and the white, and then you miss the gray. Sometimes it's every scenario is different. So it's again, it's all a matter of perspective. Again, like also you being a woman, you're more inclined to see like the more infidelity side, but you're like, no one ever asked the question, why did he do what he did? Not that I'm saying it justifies the act, but like a lot of people never ask that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe he wasn't in a place that had a safe environment like I was talking about before. So
and it's funny when you say that, when I have conversations with other people, I obviously have people in my life who have been unfaithful, whether it's friends, whether it's family, and you actually talk to them about it. You see things from both sides, but yeah, the one thing which always comes back to me is just the lack of communication, the lack of talking, or the lack of creation of those like safe spaces that you're talking about, where had you said one thing, you would have created a safe space and avoided this. But at the same time, sometimes you do talk and you don't get that safe space. And in those situations, yes, society will look at you and be like, but you know what you were doing for yourself. Right? Yeah.
And then like going back to what I was saying, I honestly feel 80% of the problems we have in the world would be solved if people just sat down and talked.
Yeah. It's tricky because like Tasha, if I'm to allude to like what you were talking about earlier, was sort of like the environment that he didn't want anymore, because she was a thug and she was laundering money as a thug, and he wanted that like straight, I'm going clean life, which is what Angela represented as well. Yeah. And it's almost like that environment thing that you were talking about, where sometimes you realize the people that you're around are
Yeah,
keeping you in an environment that no longer feeds you.
yeah, and that's it also speaks to like growth, where it's like I think she reminded him of his past and as a reminder of where he wanted to go and where he was going,
Yeah.
and that's it's a conversation that happens all the time where it's like a lot of it too. Like even for me, like I've I'm I acknowledge now I'm broken, I've made mistakes, and the things I've done in my past, but that's not who I am. I made those mistakes.
Mm,
Like, if you have people constantly reminding you of that, how you
mm,
how does that enable you to change?
yeah.
So sometimes like you need like a clean slate where you like clear everything out.
Yeah.
And it's often the people who are closest to you who won't acknowledge like the change that you've made. They keep trying to take you back to that place. But I'm like,
Yeah.
you've clearly highlighted something that's wrong with me. I'm trying to change it, but here you are roping me back into that lifestyle again more into
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
It's a weird dynamic, but it happens all the
Yeah.
time.
I mean, we could actually go on talking forever. But yeah, one question I really want to ask you while we still have the chances, how are you? Like, and I mean this in like the most like wholesome way possible,
Yeah,
because I understand the goals, I understand the target, I understand like the quotes, I understand the pursuit, but I also understand the waking up every day and realizing that shit, I'm still not there, and it's actually a fucking fight still, and it's yeah. So I understand the days when, and someone explained this to me really well. I think it was a sermon, and now I don't remember who preached it, but they were talking about Joshua and how when before Joshua went into for like the Battle of Jericho, the thing that God said is, do not be afraid. And
yeah,
it was like, yeah, cool. It's like fun to say, do not be afraid. And then
yeah,
the next thing you say, then do not be discouraged. So
yeah.
it's like, yeah, once you're not afraid, cool, you'll go in fearless, but you'll still be discouraged. You're not afraid, but there's still days that will draw you back to that thing where you're gonna be discouraged. So yeah, basically, in summary, how are you doing?
I think I'm in a good place, and like you said, like too, for me, it ebbs and flows.
Mm,
Days that are better than others, and then there are days like in like just I struggle getting out of bed. But I think a lot of it too is just I think just me sitting in those emotions
yeah.
and not sitting there in too long. I think expressing what I'm feeling and then having people around who I can call because there've been days where I'm just like, man, this is wild. Something just happened, blah blah blah. I have people around me to talk about it with, and then there are days that are great. I think for me, it's been just getting into a place where I'm having those conversations with myself and
Mm,
realizing what my purpose is and giving myself a lot of grace. I think that's
mm,
one thing I've been struggling with, where it's like I'm realizing, like for me, I've always been big on affirmations, especially the past couple of months. One of the biggest things is I wrote affirmations of everything that I wanted to become. It's crazy, like particularly in relationship, it's like write the list of the things that you want in your partner and then become those people. So for me,
yeah.
I actually wrote affirmations of the things I wanted in my life and who I wanted to become. And even like with the 4 F's in life, I broke down those steps. And there's some days I do some things great, and then some days I don't do everything great. So it's for me, it's a constant battle, and like that's one of the things that it says in the book. Like it's a never-ending journey, right?
Mm, mm,
Um, I feel like I'm in a good place. I'm not always, happy, but I
yeah.
didn't even ask that because I feel like it's a conversation we need to have regular. Even like that's what I'm saying. Even like the weekly check-ins. I'm like, like how are you? Like some days I'm a 10, some days I'm a 5,
Mm,
some days I'm a 2. It's all very relative, but I think I'm in a good place. And I the thing that keeps me growing, even on the days I want to give up, is like I remember what my why is. My
mm,
is definitely my mom and my sister. They're a big push to, but also the biggest push is the person I am becoming.
yeah.
I look at all the obstacles I've overcome, and I'm like, I didn't get this far to give up here. I'm so
Yeah.
excited to see the person I will become.
Yeah.
I also realize that there's going to be things I need to stumble on, and that's a part of life. We all stumble. I think
Yeah.
the problem is that we're searching this perfection of life that is unattainable because like there's no perfect people. And
Mm,
the
mm,
problem in relationships that's how I've been able to give people grace because like there's no perfect relationship because there's no perfect people.
yeah.
And that's why for me, like the biggest thing is even though when life is crazy, I've been fighting for my peace.
Yeah.
And it's been crazy, like in the most tumultuous times of my life, like last couple of months, it's been the most peace I've been where it's like I often retell certain stories to certain friends, like what?
Yeah. Yeah.
But, and also for me, going back to me, I went back to the foundation.
Yeah.
God is my foundation. In a lot of situations where if I had retaliated, I couldn't do anything. But there's actually like I saw this today, actually, I took a screenshot of it, and it's funny because that's been what the thing has been. It's Exodus 14, and it says, God will fight for you. All you have to do is be still.
I'm not good at that.
I wasn't good at it, and then I tried. I'm like, clearly what I've been doing hasn't been working, and I tried it. Yeah. And there were certain situations where I did nothing.
Yeah.
And then look at how the things have even happened. For example, the certain people who are in my life, they aren't in my life anymore. And for example, with Joe Budden, it's funny how God works where it's like, my face is everywhere.
That's what I was saying, that I would hate you right now. It's so annoying.
And that's the thing, like, it's funny because it felt like God was almost saying, like, I got you, don't need, because I didn't even
worry, yeah.
Like that widespread. So it's like, it's funny where it's like, for me, that's the mindset I have. Like there's certain situations where obviously I have to deal with. And then the others where I just like,
yeah,
I sit and I pray. And that's been like, for me, going back to my foundation where it's like, I've been praying so much and going back to that. And I think you have to find whatever your foundation is. You have to be a Christian, and it could be anything, whatever that thing is, go back to that. Going back to what I was saying, like when I was in high school playing rugby, when the plan failed, the coach would be like, let's go back to the basics. Let's just keep it. Yeah. And that's what I've been doing. And it's like, the days I'm not okay, I'm just like, I just leave it up to the big man and most stuff. And then there's times where it's like, okay, I need you to do this and that. And I think that's why I've been so at peace, because for so long, I was trying to control my life and try to control things I have no control about. I'm like, sometimes I get calls about things, and I'm like, cool.
Yeah. Like, what you want me to do with that information?
That situation, but cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's often tough because it's like the people closest to you, like just yesterday, my mom calls me about a situation. I'm like,
yeah.
Firstly, I am like so far away from you.
Yeah.
I can't deal with the situation, but I'm like,
yeah.
Cool. And I just left it as is. I'm like, big man.
Like, yeah. Do the thing. Do your thing.
I think for me, I'm good. The days that aren't that great, but I'm in a good space. I have people around me. I have good coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stumble, but it's like, I think that's the thing. It's a part of it. Just
it's a journey.
It's a journey, and especially like the last couple of weeks where I've been a little distracted, and like things haven't been going the way I've wanted because I kind of lost that momentum. But then I had to remind myself, I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, and reminding myself of all the struggles. And like, one of my, Eric Thomas has this thing that he says, like, recycle your pain. And I remember every situation that has brought me up until this point. And even like, for example, like I do a lot in the gym, or even like I'm discouraged, or even with work. And I remember being in that situation. I'm like, okay, so let's go again.
Yeah.
So I think that's where I'm at. How are you doing? That's my question. How are you doing?
I'm good. I need to answer this more honestly.
Yeah. I was like, when you're like good, I'm like, okay, like on a scale of 1 to 10, like what?
Right now, and the reason this is hard to answer is I haven't asked myself this in a long time. So yeah, like you're saying, you get used to just saying fine.
Yeah.
I would say quite honestly, I'm maybe a 3 or 4 out of 10.
Yeah.
Which sucks, right? Because that's not what I had pictured for myself around this time.
Yeah, and it happened.
Yeah, and it does happen, and like there's the sense of there's a lot of good things happening in my life. So I'm similar to you in the sense that like once in a while it's not a billboard for me.
Yeah.
But I see something and I'm like, damn, I prayed for this.
Yeah.
But still understanding that when you prayed for it, the state of mind you were in is different from the state of mind I'm in now.
Yeah.
So, and that makes things harder. I think in terms of like being able to process your victories, like it's just difficult to get certain victories when you're no longer in the mindset for them, and like trying to recalibrate that like gratitude thing because I'm really grateful, don't get me wrong, but it's also buried under your feelings and your emotions and whatever it is that you're going through at the time. So yeah, that's really where I am. I'm questioning a lot of things, questioning a lot of like my philosophies, questioning my approach to things, and so on. And yeah, just it goes all the way from questioning just how nice you are or how nice you want to be going forward, or yeah, it is what it is. I don't know how to explain it. It's a weird place to be in, and I've never been in this place before, so I don't have the words for it yet. But I'll find them. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's the thing. It's I'm gonna say it's totally okay to be in that space.
Yeah.
Even the conversation I was having with myself at this stage in my life, there's so many things I never thought I would. I never thought I would be in this space.
Yeah.
Flip side, I'm like, there's a lot of things that have happened to me that I never thought I would have my face on a billboard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Perspective where it's like, I think a lot of it too is like we try to be so much control of our life, and we think this is how our life is supposed to go, and then life is just telling us, no, there's so much more that's happening, and like, yes, this is what you want, but it might not happen the way you think it is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
I think it's always just being open to the lessons, and just like obviously like there's a main goal, but there's many ways that it can happen, and there's many ways you can get to that destination. There isn't just like one way. I think that we're so fixated on like this is the way we need to do it.
Yeah.
And that's the problem was, again, like if you look at like if you took a step back and like again every single morning start off my day with an attitude of gratitude. If you look back, there's so many things that you have in your life that are not according to your plan, but you have.
Yeah. And they just work out.
And I'm just like, oh, like this is way better than what I had pictured.
Yeah. Yeah.
Often it doesn't make sense in the moment. And that's why I'm a big person on journaling. And one book I'd recommend, Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. I always make this recommendation.
It's on my wish list. Okay. Yeah.
I might have to get it for you.
Dude, yeah.
This book, because that's exactly what it talks about. It's like sometimes in life, like a traffic light, it's a red light for a reason, and then it's like a green or like an amber. And we never understand it at that time, but when we look back at it, it makes sense. But a lot of people, like, we don't document all of that, so it's hard for us to be like,
yeah.
If you look back, for example, like let's say even a year from now, there's a lot of things that you weren't happy with in your life, and you look back in hindsight, you're like, this is why.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sort of living in that where it's like, I know I'm living in answered prayers, both the positives and negatives. Because it's like you say, sometimes you pray for something you're not ready. It's either answer for, and then now you have to deal with that. So yeah, I think that's where I am.
Yeah.
And we'll see. I'm optimistic is the thing. Like I'm part of that, my sadness is more like you're optimistic and things will get better. And I'm just almost in a rush to get to better as opposed to now. But it's fine. Like it's I'm really better than I should be, I think. Yeah.
A lot of it is patience. Like for me,
like
I said to you, like a lot of my bad days too, where it's like the experiences I've had the last couple of months, I'm like, man, God, you really waited until this very moment?
Like really?
Why didn't 2 or 3 years ago where it would have?
Yeah.
But again, in hindsight, even like with a lot of people that have been my friends that aren't my friends, or relationships that have failed and whatever, there's so many lessons I've learned, and I'm like, if I hadn't met this person, there's a certain skill I wouldn't have learned. And like going back to like the universe or God or whatever you believe in, puts you in a classroom until you learn that lesson. And I
You
think that's
to be in that classroom. Yeah.
there's that lesson that you need to learn right now, and you just haven't learned it, and it's
Yeah.
until to that answer or whatever it is, you're not going to
Yeah.
move on to the stage.
Yeah.
Because think about it, like you said, maybe that's what's stopping you from the next thing that you're supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
You do that thing now, you're not going to be able to fully embrace that blessing or whatever that opportunity is. And a lot of the times too, like a lot of people think they're ready for it, but it's like, okay,
Yeah.
I wanted to be a millionaire. Like at 16, I'm like, okay, I'm a million. Would I be able to even handle that money?
Would you even be here to tell the story? Yeah.
I would have
Have
probably
driven off a cliff or something. Yeah.
often like done some wild things with it. And that's the thing I realized too. It's like going back to what I said before, we have all the answers that we need
Yeah.
within us.
Yeah.
We just don't take the time to discover. And like, again, like there's a lesson that you need to be learning. And I think people just don't take the time to fully analyze and fully embrace.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
me, like for me, for example, like again, like that magnetism that I was talking about, that people like attracted to me. I was thinking about that actually today. I'm like, how do I use that for my benefit? How do I? Because even with me, like there've been things I've been wanting to do. I'm like, I have the resources to do stuff. I just haven't done it, or just like used the skill to do it. So it's like a lot of the times, like we're in our own way, and we don't even know because we've never had those conversations with ourselves. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, Stanley, I think that's a good place to end. I don't know if you have something you really want to hammer in on before we sign out.
No, I think just going back to my quote, be yourself and let the world adapt. Don't let anyone steal you. Don't let anyone change you. I mean, like change is good, but don't let it make people don't let people and circumstances let you lose the essence of who you are.
Yeah.
Who you are is what drives you to certain things, and I think a lot of people don't harness that.
Yeah.
Again, like if I hadn't fully embraced this whole outlandish personality that I am, I wouldn't be. And I often sit and think about it, I'm like, man, if I wasn't that person again, I wouldn't be in front of that billboard because I'm like, I could have like, no, modeling is not for me. I'm not a model, but because of who I am and my essence, I was able. Even the opportunity, how it came was a friend ran the agency. He's like, hey, I think you'd be good at it because of your personality. And that I'm also a photographer too. Like it's weird being on the flip side where it's like because I'm a photographer, I will often know certain angles, and it's easier for me to work with people that we've worked with like models who are like doing this for years. They're not as good as you are. So even for that too, like I end up staying for that shoot. I end up staying and helping out the creative team. Like with like, I think going that to like just be yourself and let the world adapt. Because often we lose ourselves and like be who you are. Because at the end of the day, like, and then we're all gonna die.
Yeah.
It's just gonna be you alone in that casket in that grave. They don't make graves for two people. So it's just.
And I liked how you started off with the immortal. We started off with being immortal, and God's made you immortal. He put you on a billboard, like, like those pictures will be there. The ads, we see old ads from like way back in the day. Yeah, and it's like once you've decided you're gonna be something, the universe of whatever it is you believe in.
Like there's people who see those billboards and like,
damn. Like, well, I'm super happy to have had this conversation, and this is like a big part of the podcast for me. I see you guys all the time, right, in like random places, whether it's like the bar, like bump into you at a bar, or I bump into you outside, but it's really weird for me to want to have an intimate conversation like this amongst other people. So this is what I love about this space, and I do know that it'll help someone or the 4 or the million that you're aiming for.
One person who watches them their life, that's all that matters to me because that one person changed.
Yeah.
Like Steve Jobs was just one guy, Here we are. Apple was doing wild things. So I mean, that's all you need, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to see the final clip and like see how people react to it. But even if they don't like it, I just don't care.
We put it out there for the world. So if you've been listening up until this point, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much to Stanley for his vulnerability. As he mentioned, he's doing a lot of like projects with help that are meant to help with mental health. So I will be attaching his handles, and you can reach out to him directly. I think he's open to that.
Oh yeah, hit my thumbs up. I mean, I might take a little long to respond, but I mean, my number and my email is also in my account. So if you want to just give me a call, that usually gets faster responses. Because I mean, like with all the stuff that's been happening, like the DMs have been popping. It's a little bit too much, but I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just gonna take it for just for the gram.
For Instagram.
This is what happens when content creators.
Yeah. Perfect, guys. Thank you so much for being with us up until this point, and thanks again to Stanley. I will put his details in the captions, and yeah, I'll see you on the next episode.
Peace.